Can you all hear me? Okay. So I'm going to give just a short talk on this, and I'd like to have conversation about it more. So what I wanted to talk about is the wisdom of no escape. And so I think the first thing to appreciate is that if we love wisdom, and that's an if, because sometimes we love samsara more. But if we love wisdom, then we have some commitment to being on the spot. That's just what comes with wisdom, because when we're talking about prajna wisdom, we're not talking about wisdom about something. We're talking about wisdom, the direct experience, and direct experience is always on the spot. So I think it's very useful to think about the wisdom of no escape, that if we love wisdom, there is no escaping our human condition. And I don't mean this in an idealistic way, because we all do escape our human condition. That's what we do. We have defense mechanisms. We get depressed. We get angry. We get irritable. We have the whole range of human emotions we all have. But if we're on this path, I think there's at least an aspiration that when we get triggered in some way and we're reacting, that instead of going with that defense mechanism and letting it be a full-blown drama, we actually lean into it, and we have a practice for leaning into it that allows us to breathe into it, to be embodied with it, to stay with it. So we could just take any emotion. Anger is the one I often use because everyone can relate to it. If you're triggered and you're upset. Hi, Susan. So I just started talking a little bit about the wisdom of no escape, and what I've been saying is that if we love wisdom, then it always puts us on the spot, because wisdom, prajna wisdom, the kind of wisdom we're talking about is always direct. It's always on the spot. And we could also love samsara. We could, and so we all have conditioning and habits that take us away from being on the spot. And so if we have an aspiration to value wisdom over samsara, I'm just speaking broadly, then when things trigger us, and I'm using the example of anger, when you get triggered with anger, you can go with the story and you can have a full drama and soap opera with that, and you can really get into it. We all know what that's like. When that freight train gets going, you solidify the anger, and then you want to hang that projection on some poor sentient being. So we've all done that. We've all acted out anger, or we've stuffed it by contracting and being passive aggressive, really nice. which is never nice. But so the wisdom of no escape is realizing we're kind of stuck with ourselves, and there's no really, you can try to escape anger by acting it out, but you just create more suffering. Anger is like a boomerang. It comes back and bites you in the butt. You're angry at somebody and you kick a door and you break your foot. That's anger's like that. So there's really, I think if we're clear about what practice is and what we are committed to in terms of a spiritual path, we are committed to showing up and being on the spot, even though we don't do it all the time. we're kind of moving in that direction. In the peacemaker community, when we did council circle, we used to call this turning into the skid. When something comes up that's a shadow thing in council, you can either ignore it and because you've got an agenda you want to do, or you can allow that new thing that's on the table to be present. And it's usually uncomfortable. And so part of loving wisdom is our willingness to be uncomfortable, our willingness to be confused, our willingness to be embarrassed, our willingness to be bewildered, which is usually not, or uncertain. We usually like to at least have the illusion that we're in control of everything, that we've got it all together, but a lot of the time we don't. And so I think that's what the wisdom of no escape is about, is that if you love wisdom, you're gonna be on the spot as much as you can, and that includes the things that are difficult, the places where we all disown something, and we want to run away. We want to, we use this metaphor in the first foundations of mindfulness of the integration in the river of life. There's just two ways we go out of balance or we go out of integration. We act out or we contract. So if you think of that as a window of tolerance for what we mean by being mindful, mindfulness helps us be resilient because it can help us build a wider window of tolerance for those emotions or experiences we have where we get triggered and we can't seem to be present with it. We go off. And when we go off, we step out of that place where we can work with it. So when we're, no one does depression well. I mean, it's sort of, and yet we all know what that's like when we contract. And you sit and watch a series of Netflix movies and eat a quart of ice cream on the couch. Everyone's done that. We don't do that well, but you can practice with depression by acknowledging it and actually working with it. And I think that goes for any experience we have where we get triggered in some way and we become reactive. We either act out or we contract. And I think I think we're doing it quite a lot all the time and may not even be aware of it. But I think in many ways we have been dulled down by our culture and have kind of we do this as a defense mechanism because to really be open to everything that's going on is pretty disconcerting, could be. So that's what I mean by the wisdom of no escape. I think it's a commitment we make if we love the Dharma and we love wisdom, we try to show up for it because that's what wisdom does. Wisdom shows up. Wisdom is always on the spot, and we either are honoring that wisdom or we're trying to run away from it. And I think if you really honor wisdom, there is no escape because wisdom's always going to put us on the spot. It's always going to put us on the hot seat. And that's kind of a razor's edge to be on. Not necessarily comforting. To be the idea of being on a razor's edge is not exactly a comforting metaphor. But wisdom is, anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. And I think we could just have a discussion about it. I don't have any profound things to say about this, but I just wanted to kind of open this as a subject for discussion, and we could talk about how we work with that. So if you want to say something, go ahead and unmute yourself and just speak up, and then remember to mute yourself after you talk, so and we could have a group discussion here. Anybody?
Yeah, for me, it's a matter of catching it in time to work with it. It's often, not often, I'm improving, but my awareness of what's going on inside me is coming sooner than it would have in the past. And sometimes I will act appropriately. I will actually catch myself in time before. But once the switch is flipped, it might take me 10 minutes to 6 months to come back to it.
Yeah, interesting.
I definitely noticed from practice that the switch is not switched as often or as quickly. I'm much more aware of what's going on inside me. But it does get switched, and I do have regrets. But I can work with it then. I can work with what actually happened, and hopefully catch it a little bit sooner next time.
Yeah, that's interesting what you're saying, Ungo, because I think when we intervene in the trigger, when we're being triggered into something that's reactive, the earlier we intervene, the better, easier it is to self-correct or regulate that. But the later we intervene, the harder it is. So if you let something go too long, you can really get stuck in it and solidify it. And then not only do you suffer, but you create suffering for people around you. And then you have to deal with what you said to them. And it just gets more and more complicated. So the Buddhist teachings are actually very skillful. When the Buddha says that, in the Foundations of Mindfulness, he says emotions are either pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. If you're experiencing the emotion that early, before you create all the content that goes with it, you're intervening very early in the process, and I think much more able to manage and regulate what comes out of that than if you allow it to fester and yeah, I think you all know what I'm talking about, called suffering. Yeah, I often get triggered in situations where I feel like I don't have enough time, and I have a deadline or something is coming at me, and there's just a feeling like I feel like I'm kind of in a box, and there's no way out. And I often get triggered in those kind of situations where I just freak out. I just can't, it's hard to be in that pressure cooker sometimes. Anybody else?
Hi, Will. Good morning, Roshis and Sangha. I'm finding that, just really understanding with my practice the difference between my feelings and my emotions. The feelings are what's going on inside. And then there's the point where my feelings turn into how I emote and how I extend that out into the world.
Uh-huh.
Really trying to be purposeful in giving myself a nice bridge between those two. That's a real difficult thing for me, but I'm working on it.
It's interesting. I used to teach this in the Foundations of regulating emotions. If you approach emotions biologically, because emotions are rooted in our evolution and our biology, you have a way of understanding emotions that's more positive, in a sense, that every emotion has a purpose. And if you don't use the word feeling, but you use the word emotion, notice that in emotion, it contains the word motion. Emotions are were built into us in terms of the evolution to move us to do something. So like anger has emotion in the body. Before you have the story that goes with it, you have it in the body as a motion where you want to hit something. You want to go out and, hit something. And you can get any emotion that way in the body first before you interpret it through your story. And that's again an example, I think, of how you can intervene earlier in the in an emotion, so that you can be in an integrated place where you're working with it rather than it just takes you over. Yeah. Anyone else?
I was thinking when you said earlier, Roshi, about we'd rather be in samsara. I don't think that's a conscious decision. It's just force of habit. I don't think I'm saying to myself, I'd rather suffer this way. It's just something that habit. It's how I'm programmed. It's more comfortable, but it's definitely not a
Yeah,
decision.
no, we just have to be realistic about our human condition. I think sometimes freedom is more scary than suffering. And if you really think of being free, which is what our Buddhism is pointing at, being enlightened, which means to be liberated from suffering. Well, if you had a little genie, you took it, you made a wish and you had a genie bottle and you said, and you wished for complete and utter total freedom. Would you really want that? If you got that, if the genie came out of the bottle and said, I'm giving you complete, absolute, total freedom, would you want that? That's a little scary, because freedom also implies some responsibility and reciprocity with others. And so I think it's useful to appreciate that samsara is monumental. And we're kind of all in the wheel of samsara. It's what we've been born into. And we're not just going to, because we're practicing, we're not just going to be out of that wheel. We're constantly getting caught in those cycles of suffering. But practice helps us, as you said, Ungo, it might help us see it a little earlier. And what might have lasted a month for you 5 years ago lasts a week or a couple, maybe a day. Yeah. Anyone else want to say something?
Um, so I was really grateful for the session on Saturday,
Yeah.
because a lot of times you really don't know how you're feeling, even though you're feeling something really deep. Like, there's a lot of things that have been happening that have made me kind of really sad, like Gaza, the genocide going on in Gaza, my personal friends over here, suffering deep losses. And at the council, I just, I was really sad. And with sadness comes tears. That's like prajna, right? So I was just feeling sad. And I
Yeah.
was able to just share that, even though I kind of didn't want to, because I have this thing about crying as not being so, cool for a Zen master. So, but it was so liberating, actually. It was
Yeah.
really liberating, and I felt so much better. It was like it was just holding it all, and I just couldn't anymore. And that's our practice, right? The open-hearted, regenerating bodhicitta, as we practice hard, that you just feel it.
Anytime we touch our broken heart, have that kind of sadness and grief, it's grounding. And it's a place of strength, not a place of weakness. Our culture is so hard in a way. We deny all that softness, all that vulnerability, all that grief that we all have. If we actually open to the grief about what's going on in our world, I think we almost couldn't stand it. So we have ways of taking it in little pieces. But when you're opening, and like you did in a sesshin, and you're sitting more, and then you're in council, you're really being invited by everyone in the Dharma and the practice to touch that tender place in you. It's almost always sad. I mean,
Right, and it was an embodied
Yeah. Yeah.
response, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't intellectual.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I can. As I'm listening, I'm realizing that I build narratives around situations that are disturbing for me at the moment, that can evoke anger or sadness. And sitting in the morning can be really helpful with the narratives, because afterwards I can say, see, I sat for 45 minutes and I didn't have that narrative and I'm still okay. I'm still sad or I'm angry and I don't need the narratives. And another thing is that sometimes at night before I go to sleep, I don't know who I'm asking, myself or the spirits or whatever, to help me dream in ways that will, when I wake up, I'll go, oh, and sometimes I do. And waking up and just sort of processing them before I sit, and then sitting without the narrative have been really helpful for just being able to be present to myself and to sadnesses and angers.
Yeah, there's nothing matter with telling stories. We're human beings. We tell stories, but ruminating and telling the story over and over again kind of creates a groove or a habit in our mind, and we get better at doing that. And that isn't necessarily going to help us be on the spot. Everyone knows what that's like when you go to bed and you're upset and you're ruminating about something. As you get older, it gets harder to go to sleep then. So I'm very careful now before I go to bed to manage my time as well as I can so that I don't get upregulated in some way with an emotion, because if that happens and I'm lying in bed, I'm not going to go to sleep. Again, I think what I want to emphasize is the love of wisdom. That's not necessarily something our culture values, but to love wisdom is to love everything that is here on the spot with our experience, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, whether it's fearful or not, whether it's sad, whatever it is, that's the wisdom that's showing up. And I think if we love wisdom, we're okay with what shows up, even though it may be upsetting or uncomfortable. And that love of wisdom then allows us to bear witness to that and be with it in such a way that we integrate it and can move through it and use it, actually transform things that could be we might view as being negative into something positive. So you could if you're feeling like a victim and you really work with that, you could transform that into working with other people in a different way. So you can take anything that you consider negative, and by bearing witness to it through practice and through wisdom, transmute that negativity into something positive. So anyway, that's our short little discussion for today. Yeah. Anything else anyone wants to say?
Yes, I would like to say more of these, please.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll try to do these like a half-hour thing like this every couple of weeks or so, where we
Yes.
can just have a little conversation about, and just remember how transformative this practice is. If we give our hearts, do it wholeheartedly, then it really works. And we got lots of challenges right now in our lives and in the world. There's lots of, boy, I can't listen to the news all the time anymore. It's just too toxic. It's just too disheartening. So, take care of yourselves, manage your information that you take in so that you don't get overwhelmed and taken down by it, and keep sitting so we can be the Buddhas that we are, and then we can help others. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roshi.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Bye.